Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Maureen Lowe. I'm the founder and president of FTF and our online news service, FTF News. And I'm going to be moderating our brief session this morning. As our marketing had said, a number of these questions came out of a recent webinar that we did on why automation alone doesn't scale operations. And we had so many questions, we couldn't get to them all. So we're here to do a little Q&A to answer some more questions and look at more why firms or how firms are automating rather than why. And we're joined today by Murray Campbell, who's with AutoRec, and also Jeff McGee, who's recently joined AutoRec, and he has more of an operations background and was most recently at Millman, so he can speak to a lot of the challenges that some of you might be facing when it comes to operations and automation. So with that, you'll see that you are able to ask questions today. So we encourage you to do so. I don't know how much time we'll have to get to all of them, considering we only have 30 minutes and we're already covering a number of questions. So please upvote if you see a question that you like in particular, or if you feel like you have an answer to something that somebody has asked, feel free to pop that into the response into the chat yourselves. So we very much encourage an interactive setting for today. So feel free to talk amongst yourselves. So with that, let's jump right in. We ready, guys?
Ready to go.
Ready to go. Okay. So one of the popular questions that we had are what are some of the best ways to identify quick wins when it comes to automation and when you're entering into a new space?
If I'll start with that one. So if I think about quick wins, we're obviously looking to deliver an element of change with kind of minimal fuss, minimal impact. And in order to be able to really do that, I think first of all, we need to have a really good understanding and good knowledge of the operational landscapes. What are the processes that we're carrying out across operations? What are the end-to-end tasks that we're carrying out as part of that process? We can then start to kind of map out and think, like, where do we have those kind of heavily manual touch points, heavily manual processes, and start to narrow in on those as areas for potential automation. Again, when we're thinking about if we want to try and target a quick win, we're obviously thinking that it has to be a fairly kind of standalone process or element of a process that can be targeted. So you want it to be fairly specific, ideally a fairly small, straightforward process, so that you can kind of limit the scope that you're trying to introduce across the automation. As soon as you start to kind of infringe on other areas of the business or other impact on other processes, that's when the scale of the project that you're trying to take on just grows arms and legs, and you start very quickly moving away from what's a potential quick win. So I think really having that understanding of what is that you want to achieve, and also from that process that we're automating, can we quite clearly put kind of defined rules and logic around that process? And in which case, if we can, then obviously that's perfectly placed for how automation is going to be able to carry out that process for us. So really understanding those elements is really important. And if we think about how we would automate kind of your reconciliation processes, so firms will carry out many different reconciliations, and trying to automate all of those as an end target state can be quite an objective. But if we're looking to introduce quick wins in that scenario, or what's the key first phase where we can quickly deliver value, we're going to look at the process that's most well understood, and ideally the most straightforward process. So we might have a standard bank reconciliation where we have two well understood sources of data, straightforward matching between those sources, and we can deliver that automation pretty quickly, pretty seamlessly, and really get time to value very quickly, and then allow users to start using this new system, new automation, while starting to think and learn about what future use cases might look like. So that's a kind of quick way of saying this is how we would get you to live with a new process quite quickly. I think one possible word of caution that I would always have, and when we spoke in the original webinar, we spoke about, how do firms get themselves into kind of challenges with automation. And I think coming at it from a mindset of, how do we get a quick win? Does that really sit well with a more strategic viewpoint in terms of how is the firm really going to be using technology and data and automation across the business. If you're constantly, I suppose, seeking quick wins, and you might just
Mm,
end up down several little small rabbit holes and little
mm.
paths where you've got elements of systems across the place which don't really come together in any sort of coherent fashion. So I think that would just be one word of caution in terms of maybe necessarily seeking out quick wins in that respect.
So in a way, you're saying don't get overwhelmed by thinking you have to figure out the whole thing at once and the end game at once. You want to start with little wins, but make sure you have at least a strategic plan in place so you're not just doing quick wins without seeing how you're going to progress.
Exactly, yeah. Making sure
Right.
those quick wins still fit in as part of the overall journey of where you're trying to get to. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Good stuff.
Um, Jeff, did you want to add anything to that? Or should we move on to the next question?
Oh, we can move to the next.
Here we go. So with that, do you have any suggestions on how to review, how firms can review their current state of automation efficiencies while also dealing with constant production enhancement and requests and projects?
So I kind of look at certain things of like kind of like what Murray just alluded to is like, figuring out where you can automate, where things like that. Like I kind of make a distinction between automating a process versus automating tasks.
Mm,
And tasks being a more granular level. And in my world, I've kind of, the reconciliation world, a lot of middle office, back office processes are in Excel. Even if people have a more end-to-end broad-based platform, Excel always lives in our ecosystem. And people make these automated processes or tasks, I guess. And it becomes like almost like a series of just micro automations. Like, oh, I automated the pulling of this file, or I
mm,
automated the sending of this to another system. And you need to be able to look at it more of like, do you want to automate the entire process, or you just want to keep trying to glue together these mini automations? And to me, it's better to stand back and kind of create a roadmap plan before you start implementing a lot of these, because a lot of these micro implement automations just become very person specific to whoever wrote it. A lot of times they're written in like a Python script or a VBA script or something like that. So that person moves on. If it breaks, no one knows how to fix it, and then it's just sits there. So my thought is, I'm like just taking a broad-based view of like what middle back office is and how it doesn't need you to fix everything at once, but just understanding better, like how an automation here, maybe you can automate it downstream a little bit further to play into help out settlements, help moving into, even post reconciliation. If we can automate something after reconciliation that plays into margin validation. Then even a lot of when my prior world using AutoRec, we used it to, as soon as you got done with our reconciliations, we were able to create outputs off of that we were able to send out back to portfolio managers for daily reporting, also back into out to certain clients that wanted very just validations of their positions every day. So like it's being able to just sort of chain things together like along the process when you're like, oh, we just want to automate reconciliation. Like, well, piggybacking off of that, this plays into this plays into that, and kind of so on. And just understand like you can link those things together better than just looking at them as standalone processes.
mm. And for firms that might have those little micro automations, as you referenced them, like what would they do to move forward? So say now, like, okay, we have all these micro automations. We need to take a step back and strategize. Like, how do they move forward to do that?
That's the other thing is again, it's just a matter of taking a step back and looking at like what's the grand, like more broader goal of this. A lot of times these micro automations tend to be these things of just like moving files from A to B, pulling them from FTPs, pulling them from counterparty websites, sometimes sort of normalizing a file, things like that. And like so to me, it's like if you have and if you're shops that I've been at, like a lot of them, they're not necessarily they're larger, but not to the extent where they're going out and buying massive end-to-end systems. So like it's more of a modular infrastructure. So it's a matter if you do have sort of that modular infrastructure, where like in this case of just like you bought a system for margin, you have a separate system for reconciliation, another for settlements, like uh sort of looking for platforms that have a broader reach that can kind of help you out with certain things. And like how many things can you sort of uh keep within a more kind of commercialized system. So if you have a reconciliation platform, like, well, does that reconciliation platform have a data normalization capability? So then you don't have to have that, like a lot of clients we talk to already normalize data when they try to load it to the reconciliation platform. We can do that. or your reconciliation platform should be able to do that. Same thing when it comes to margining platforms, the data prep becomes a thing. Like having a platform like that can, a lot of recon platforms can already do data normalization. How can it feed into upstream and downstream? Now you can take out some of those micro kind of automations just by consolidating them into one process as opposed to just separate individual tasks.
Okay. So the next most popular question we always get a lot is about data and the underlying data. So how prevalent is bad underlying data and what are the main impacts of it? For example, contracts that weren't captured properly, gaps in data feeds from upstream systems, etc.
For me, I mean, I think everybody's well aware of that. Like, it all starts with the quality and cleanliness of the data. I mean, data comes in at some point, like we all have the data we need. It's just a matter of the shape and just sort of the where it's stored and how accessible it is. And then you have to normalize it and aggregate it. I mean, all the data is never in just one report. A lot of times you're consolidating multiple reports into one feed. And I would say like a lot of firms, like when they're looking at automating, and one thing that kind of, or even just looking at other outside vendors, is they get kind of nervous on how to do it. Like, oh, they don't think they're ready to move into a more formalized infrastructure, start talking to like third-party vendors, because they just say, our data is such a mess at this point. I don't even know how we would start to move in.
So what would you say to a firm that came and said that to you?
I mean, most recent place I was that was where we were. I was my biggest hang up from like, we were looking for vendors and in the reconciliation space, and it was just our data was so disparate that we had all the data we needed. It was just you were combining 20 different data sources and certain feeds, and a lot of times we were doing that with Python scripts and VBA scripts to normalize data, and it worked, but it's very unstable. They break frequently, and you find yourself always tinkering and things like that. And data changes, like it never stays in the same shape. New products come in, new accounts come in. So again, when you're looking at vendors, I'd look for things that were like, how robust and agile is their capability? Like, so we were doing an aggregation layer already to try to aggregate. I'm like, well, our platform does that for us. So like we were able to combine that all in one platform. So like it takes yes, we replaced our reconciliation platform, but process, but we also took out the aggregation piece. We could stop doing that. But then we were also able to use it into some, external like daily like trading client reports. And like, okay, we validated it. We can now send that straight out of AutoRec to somewhere else.
So you didn't have to do anything else first to fix your data. The platform you chose helped you do that too.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly did. Like that's nice for kind of where it goes to like like looking for a product that's robust enough that their data normalization and aggregation tools can handle the normalization process. Because a lot of the stuff we did was like a lot of OTC trades, and so you're dealing with a lot of various types of exotic swaps, swaptions, and CDX and things like that. So everybody knows who's dealt with those knows the reporting from counterparties on that is very sparse. And not complete. So you're combining and enriching from outside sources for like extra static data. Like, so we were looking for a platform that can kind of pull static data from one file, add it to the existing counterparty file to kind of build out a more robust data set. And that's what we had found when we had implemented AutoRec there. And it's just sort of like, again, like finding something that can pull in, like have a little bit more reach into the other areas of the business that did it. I mean, it's always very nerve-wracking to onboard an outside platform. I mean, there's a lot of things that go along with that. And I mean, if it ever goes wrong, you're the one that made the decision to do it, and it kind of lies with you. So, I mean, there's even some nerves around that too.
Now, what are some of the main impacts that if data isn't fixed first might result for firms?
Well, the thing is, you can fix the process technically by saying, oh, we have a process that automates our reconciliation. But I mean, if your data is a mess and not normalized appropriately, you have a match rate that's significantly lower. So then yes, you automated the front end process, but now you're spending that time you saved manually matching trades and things like that, because your match rules aren't robust enough to be able to handle like kind of the broken nature of the data. So like the data prep within the tool is key. And then you can start getting your data into, getting your match rates up into the mid to upper 90s in most cases. I kind of look at them like, even if you have a match rate of 95%, that sounds phenomenal. But if you got 10,000 positions, 95% still leaves you with a lot of breaks.
Mm.
So you've got to be able to keep kind of have something that's got the agility to learn and kind of help you improve and give suggestions for improving your match rates and things. So then again, you're only looking at true exceptions. Like those are the types of points where we were able to find that we were able to save the most amount of time. Not to
And
mention,
I
money, I
think
would
it's
imagine.
Yeah, I was just going to add as well. I think when we think about what those potential impacts are when we go down an automation journey, I think the really important first stage is that data mapping and that data analysis, so that before we've even started building anything, we understand the data that we're working with. We know where it's coming from. We know where there might be data issues or data challenges, and exactly to
Mhm.
what Jeff was talking about, where do we actually need to enrich data or aggregate it together so that when we get to the end kind of reconciliation stage, we've got all of the information that's needed. So that's really about, how do we set off on the best foot possible to make sure that the automation is going to work in the process so that we're not then hamstrung by the data challenges further down the line.
Very interesting. Should we move on to the next question? Do you have anything else to add to that one?
yeah, I mean, I guess it is kind of like a matter of like, again, like coming to the data and the shapes of things like that is like you have to look for a platform that's willing to meet you where you are, as opposed
Uh-huh.
to you needing to meet them where their standard of data is. And I mean, a lot of us, I mean, we all deal with portfolio managers, traders, front office people, trying to get them to change the way they report things or the way they book things or annotate things. Never easy. They're not usually willing to change the way they enter data and just report data to based on some feedback from a recon team. They're just in the history that
So,
I've dealt with it, they're not. So like you need somebody that a platform that can meet you where you are data wise and then bring you forward.
so to that point, since you've lived it yourself, um, and there are so many firms joining us today, similar to where you were, what questions would they ask to be able to ensure that whatever platform they chose was capable of doing that? Like, do you have any examples of questions
The
that you
key
would ask?
the key is that like I'm very upfront when it came to like demos when I was talking to vendors is I'm like, this is exactly what I trade. Here's the way our like I want to see that type of data in the demo. We say like I said, my prior firm, we 95% of what we traded was over the counter and bespoke types of products. If I go to a demo and I see nothing but stocks and bonds in it, I mean it's everybody can reconcile stocks and bonds. It's not that
So
difficult.
before you even get to that point, the provider has to understand your needs.
Yes, and what we're
Is that
looking and like you don't feel like you're just looking at the same
right?
that somebody, if you're working at a hedge fund and all of a sudden you're looking at now like the same demo that they showed the wealth manager, then the bank
Right.
showed a fund administrator. Like it shows that they're listening and I'm taking the time to understand. Do I think that they need to fully understand exactly the ins and outs of how a swaption works? No.
Right.
But understand the data enough to understand like what I'm trying to get to. And then, but I'm very clear with them up front about exactly what we're trying to look at, what we're trying to solve, so that they know what to show us. And that also saves the time because I have a bunch of people on my side that are watching this demo too, and I don't want that to waste their time either. Uh,
Right.
so it's being very upfront with them, like here's what we're looking for, here's what we're trying to achieve, and here's some of the restraints we're dealing with at the moment. And that's kind of the key. And then also when it comes to like the proof of concept at the end, I'm like, never move forward on a platform until you see your data in it. So like in our case, we ask clients before we go to a proof of concept, we're like,
Interesting.
give us some of your data. Feel free to not like kind of anonymize it. So if you want to, we send like an NDA about it, and like after it's done, it's gone. Like we get rid of the data, but it's just like we can show you how we would build this rec as just an option, and they can actually see and be able to if you can't visualize what your day to day looks like after seeing the demos and the POCs, then I would be very hesitant to move forward. I'm like, you have to be able to see and visualize what your future looks like in there. And I think that's where the key is uh, being able to see them like again, like our very bespoke products that we always had were it was very hard to see that in some other systems because it's not to say they couldn't do it, it's just they didn't show it to me.
Hmm.
In this case, I'm like I kind of gave some very key examples of what we were trying to do, and they were great at showing that.
That's great. And so for the next question, we might have covered some of this in what we just discussed, but just in case, again, to our audience, these are questions that came from individuals just like yourself. So to that, given you're hearing Jeff's background, if there are any questions that you would like to ask him that I'm not thinking of asking on your behalf about, processes or making decisions on platforms, please submit your questions. But beyond fixing data, what key decisions should be made prior to a transformation or technology implementation to ensure the operating model can scale effectively? So beyond data, what else should firms be keeping in mind?
So I think this is a good question. We're kind of leading off from where I left off in the last question. We were talking about quick wins. This is where we're thinking about, how are we going to build lasting success when we add kind of automation across our operational team. So I think first of all, as an organization, we need to think, what is the operating model that we want to work within? Are we targeting operational efficiency? Do we have a kind of technology first mindset? And I know you've said over and above data, but data is absolutely critical to that. So as an organization, how are we going to govern and maintain the data that we're using in our organization? With all of that known, we can then start to take other decisions in terms of how we're going to implement technology across operations to make sure that we are in line with that overall direction of travel for the organization. So we're not making kind of department level changes in terms of our processes and our systems that don't agree with the overall direction that we want to go in as an organization. And even just that, and so if we think about operations, where Jeff's came from, there'll be multiple different teams across the operational department, all of them using different systems, different processes. So how those systems are going to interact with each other and work together with each other is really key for how they're going to last together and as the company looks to move forward. So that interoperability of systems is now becoming really quite key so that we don't have just a series of different standalone systems that are all maybe using data in one way, but not maybe passing data down the line. And again, Jeff very much talked about this when he was talking about how processes interact with each other and one stage feeds the other, rather than just thinking this team does Rex in their Rex system and that's the end of that. It's about how does the data feed the Rex system? Where does the reconciled data then feed the next part of the process? So that's really key for, again, building kind of lasting success into the organization. Thinking as well about what's our kind of delivery mechanism going to be for this technology? Does the company have a kind of build first mindset where they want to build everything? And if you do you have the resources able to do that? Or are you looking for a very kind of specialized system? Are you happy to use a vendor for that and finding the right one, again, as Jeff spoke to help support that journey? So again, that's a really critical decision for making sure that we make the right decision, again, for lasting success. Other kind of technological decisions that will be made by the organization in terms of, what's our infrastructure going to look like? Do we want to move everything to the cloud, but then separately within operations, we're buying a system that can't be based in the cloud? That sort of thing is just going to conflict with the overall strategy of the organization. So when we're making that decision, it needs to kind of overall kind of sit well with the overall strategy of where the firm gets to. And then similarly, I think there's always also a people aspect to the decisions that we're taking. So when we're introducing new systems, new technologies, do we have the right skill set in-house to support them, that technology straight away? Is that something else we need to hire so that when the technology lands, we're in a place that as an organization, we can support the technology? So that's really critical as well. So I think lots of decisions that should ultimately feed into the overall strategy and direction of travel of the organization when we're making these kind of operational transformation decisions.
So to skill set, is there anything that firms should be keeping in mind now as far as enhancing skill set as maybe before they even start, looking at where they would like to automate or implement AI? Should they be, helping some staff now rather than later?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that the direction of travel for operations, and it's not even before we even get to AI, is that growing need for really strong technological understanding, but also there's no substitute for that operational expertise and experience and understanding transaction and settlement life cycle and so on. So being able to marry both of those skill sets is really important. So I think you know, operations departments are kind of traditionally quite high turnover in staff. People maybe learn about the business within operations and then take that knowledge elsewhere. Finding ways to give operational staff those new skills, whether it's technological skills, so that they can be at the forefront of developing technology and systems of the future is absolutely key for keeping staff motivated and retaining good people.
And
I mean, kind of added in like kind of like some of that the automation adds, and like one of the risks of automation is that once a process becomes automated, people tend to just do the think of it's like a set it and forget it thing and almost like tend to turn
mm,
the brain off to it. And I've always
Yeah.
learned in the world of ops, there is a lot of people that are very process driven and just they know a process through and how to do it, but their full understanding and being like a subject matter expert in the area of exactly how is this process works or what exactly is it doing, like do they understand the underlying products, gets truly exposed when the automation breaks. Do they know how to put it back together? Do they understand what broke down in it? How do they like that's sort of the thing is like when the in anyone that's worked in ops for any period of time realizes that like the biggest goal and the things are always going to break. They just always will at some point in time, and it's usually at an inopportune time. The key there is how quickly and how much of a thorough understanding does your team have. Show it helps with how quickly can you rebound and get back to online. If things sit in an automated state and for a long time and finally something breaks, you have a lot of people just stare at each other and don't know what to do. So it's sort of one of those things like alongside of the thing is you just need to have people that thoroughly understand the underlying process that's behind it so that the rebound time to get back online is drastically reduced. And that sort of to me is like just you can't let like the culture be like, oh, well, it's automated. I don't necessarily know how it works or anything like that. It just does it. And like you need to make sure your people still thoroughly understand it because an automation function will break. It just
Yeah.
it will.
And that's kind of there's a question one of the that we came in through the webinar which was talking about where does kind of automation lead operations to being overly complex, and that's
mhm,
exactly it in a nutshell. You know, you hand over so much control to the system, and as Jeff's exactly described there, you know, people therefore naturally take a step back because that's the system's job now. So you've lost that control and that
mm,
understanding of the process, particularly if we then start getting into sort of black box technology where the system does something, we've got no idea what it's doing, but there's an output at the end of it. How do you actually know whether it's right or wrong? And how do you
mm.
investigate it, particularly when it's broken? So it's a real challenge of kind of making sure that you've got the right transparency in your system. And to Jeff's point, that someone still fully understands that end-to-end process.
Yeah, I guess I'd kind of add to that is this sort of like you don't just by automating processes doesn't necessarily mean you're starting to just to remove headcount. I mean, maybe in some cases it results in that, but like I look at it, it just changes the nature of the job. Rather than being a doer, you become more of an oversight type of person where now you're kind of just you're trying to get some feedback and like data points and stuff from that automation, like some KPIs that you can just monitor, like to make sure things are going the way they should. It's like when you
Mhm,
automated it, a particular report, maybe you were only trading this certain set of products. Well, now they start trading another type that goes into that data set. For all you know, maybe the automation missed it. And it's just that if it's automated, that underlying issue could be sitting there for months before someone finds
mhm,
it. And then trying to go back and fix something like that is different. So, I mean, if you have somebody that's people that are periodically and just like look, understand the process and have the right KPIs in place and the right oversight tools to be able to make sure the process is running as it should.
mhm. I appreciate you saying that because I do, that is a question that's top of mind for people about being replaced. So I appreciate you saying that. And I'm sure a lot of others out there appreciate that point of view as well. I mean, I agree just when it comes to AI in general. And I know that so many firms are afraid of that. It's really an enhancement to placement to your job. And that's, similar with, automating, right, these processes. So to that, the $1 million question, aside from bad data, is what areas within operations are you seeing AI adoption strong and why? Because we know that, lots of firms are using AI, but not necessarily in their workflows. But where are you seeing the adoption be the strongest?
I mean, I think it's certainly being picked up more in like some of the more homogenous process-driven tasks. So, I mean, I think in the worlds of like settlements and things like that, where it can be that, I mean, I've seen it to an extent there, like in more listed products and things. I said, ways equities, the way bonds come through systems is usually pretty homogeneous, pretty straight through. You'll see it in areas like that. It's still catching up, and I think in a lot of like the derivatives markets and maybe outside of futures. But like the recon space is certainly probably one of the most ripe for automation gains, I would say, and AI gains, just because again, it's very process driven. You can have a platform that's robust enough to handle the data up front. So it is, I think that's where a lot of this will come in. You still have a lot of certain things where like, I think margin, depending on how much control you want to give up in that area, like that's probably still got a little ways to go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Particularly at least on like in the OTC side, but futures margins probably probably an area that's got a decent amount of adoption to it. But to me, I think recon is an area that AI can easily be applied and the automation can be applied just given how process driven it is.
Mm-hmm. I know the 30 minutes has gone quite fast, so we'll just wrap things up. That was the last of one of our main questions, but I think we'll just end for some folks out there really quickly. And like maybe Jeff, you're better to speak to this, but what success, what advice can you share for firms like who are starting down their own automation journey? Like what successes have you experienced and what advice can you share?
I would say like it's the biggest things is again is just broaden out the view that you're looking and make the mental distinction between automating a task versus automating a process. Having 30 automated tasks probably isn't nearly as good as having maybe 4 or 5 automated processes. So it's a matter of just like broadening out your view on it. And I would say some of those conversations, like how we rethought like our own internal operating models, is talk to other vendors and outside vendors, and just from conversing with them and seeing how they handle certain things made us rethink, even though we didn't necessarily go with them in a lot of cases, like it made you rethink your own operating model and how you could apply it differently. Um, and that's where you start to just see it, because a lot of times outside perspective, I think, helps a lot. So I mean, just
Yeah,
talking to a vendor in how they do it is just gives you a
that's great
different
advice.
kind of just gives you a different outside perspective on how you could be doing it and kind of get out of that silo. Because just the way that you're doing it probably doesn't necessarily mean the way you need to be doing it. It's just the way it's always been done. So you just continue to do it.
That's great advice. Would you like to end on anything, Murray?
I think I agree with that.
Good.
I think, yeah, would be just be, understanding your processes. You know your business, your people are the ones carrying out the processes. So speaking to them, understanding where their pain points
Mm-hmm.
are, and then you'll have a better understanding of where you should be targeting.
Okay, well, thanks. I know, as I said, this went quite quickly. So, oh, look, we're getting a clap. People are using the emojis. Give us all the claps, people. We don't mind. But thanks to everyone who was joining our live today. And thanks, Murray and Jeff, for answering our questions. It was quite helpful.
Thanks for having us.
We'll see you
Thanks,
online
Molly.
again soon. Ciao.
Thanks all.
Bye.